and of course of the Workers' Voice. It is really great to be part of this discussion tonight, and what a good time, what a great time to be on and to discuss issues, what we call bread and butter issues, that matters most to the people of Dominica at this time. And it's an honor for me, and I'm really delighted to be part of this tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Lambi. Well, those of you viewing it would have realized now that we are joined by Honorable Lennox Linton, our political leader. We just allow him to say good night, and we'll get right back to Thompson.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening to the people of Dominica at home and abroad, the people of Concord, the people of Marigot. It's a pleasure. It's always a joy and honor to be here on the Workers' Voice. And tonight, I'm especially pleased that we're joined by our Dr. Thompson Fontaine, all the way from Juba, where the time there must now be about, 3 o'clock in the morning?
After 2.
Yeah, heading to 3 o'clock.
19 past 2, yes. Heading to 3.
Yeah, Thompson, always good to see you.
Absolutely. Same here, bro. Literally.
Coffee, Honorable Lambert Charles, a very good evening all around. Good to be here.
Yeah. Okay, so Tom, we, as I said, we'll be exploring the economy, but I want it to be a resounding theme that when we would have left the studio, that would inspire hope in our young people that there are better days coming. So whatever we discuss tonight, about Dominica's economy, where we are and where we should be, I will give you the floor, Honorable Thompson Fontaine, to, begin by giving us your assessment of where we are in Dominica, our economy.
Great. Danny, thanks a lot. It's interesting that you talked about inspiring hope. We have not spoken about this, but when I was saying a silent prayer for this program tonight, I was asking God to help us to be able to inspire hope in the people of Dominica, and also to help us as we speak tonight, as we discuss the economy, to allow us to be understandable to the Dominican public, to allow us to come across clearly in ways and in words that people can understand and can relate to. So let me just begin by giving a brief rundown of where we are. It does not look very good. As you know, the IMF, they were in Dominica in November of 2021, and they have looked at the state of the Dominican economy. They have discussed with the Dominican officials, the Dominican government, and what they have said is that the economy of Dominica, in fact, it fell, the growth rate fell in the last year, in 2020, by 11%. Now, that is very important because we had Hurricane Maria in 2017, and the impact on the economy then was only 6%. The economy fell by 6%. So what this means, in effect, is that the COVID pandemic combined with malgovernance has led to an 11% reduction in Dominica's gross domestic product. That is very, very significant, that we've had a bigger impact on the economy in 2020 than we did in 2017. And there are a number of reasons for that. The Dominican economy continues to shrink in size. Basically, the economy is no longer doing as it should. We have an economy that is dominated by two things: the CBI revenues, as well as a Dominica public sector investment program. And we'll talk a lot more about this public sector investment program, because the reality of this program is that it does not have the desired impact on the economy. So although you have millions and millions of dollars being spent in Dominica, it is not translating to broad-based growth. In other words, it is not translating down to the man on the street. And that is very concerning. And there are several reasons for this. And we will talk about it more, especially when we start to discuss with Honorable Lennox Linton. We'll talk more about why it is that this is not translating. But I can tell you briefly that the main reason for this is because, unlike what your government would like you to believe, they really do not care about the people of Dominica. Why do I say that? Here we have a situation where government has so much at its disposal. Government has so much revenue. It is spending this money ostensibly in what is called a housing revolution, as well as we are told in the building of an international airport, also the building of hospitals. Yet we don't see that going down to the person on the street. And the reason for that is quite simple. We have what we call this leakage in the economy, in the sense that monies that are spent in Dominica do not necessarily remain in Dominica. And that is the problem. The main reason being, a lot of the companies that are engaged in this actual construction in Dominica, they are not from Dominica. So it means that a sizable amount of the money goes out that way. Another sizable amount goes out in the form of a leakage, in the form of imports, because you have to import particularly all of the raw material, the cement, the nails, the shingles, everything is imported. So you have a huge leakage. And the third reason, you have workers who are not employed who are not Dominican. So that a lot of the monies that goes into wages and labor, instead of staying in Dominica, it goes overseas. So you have the government spending, probably they spend $500 million in construction in 2020. But from that $500 million, you have a fraction, a tiny fraction of that $500 million really circulating and really moving around in the economy. And that's why you see, although you have this huge growth in GDP, or this huge growth in public spending, there is not the corresponding growth in GDP. So that is one of the major problems we have. The other thing that we have to talk about is the cost of living. People have been talking about how bad things are in Dominica in terms of prices. Today I saw a video a couple of days ago of a young man talking about the price of bread. The mastiff moved from $1 to $1.50, I think he said it is right now. Gas prices have been going up. The gas that is used for cooking, or cooking gas, is going up. The price of rice, of flour, everything is going up. Why? Because we are importing practically everything into Dominica. And because of the COVID pandemic, it means that prices overseas are rising. So where we normally buy our flour, rice, and other staples from, the prices are going up. So we are going to have a very difficult time going forward, because the prices will continue to rise. Inflation is going to be a major problem in the next few months. So if you think it's bad, then it's going to get even worse. But what makes it even more challenging for Dominicans is that the wages are not keeping pace with inflation. And because incomes have remained low, because incomes have remained below what is the average even for the Caribbean region, it means effectively that people are getting worse off. So even as I speak to you tonight, you'll be aware that you're getting worse off.
Let me just intervene a little bit, Tom. I want to hold you to your promise that we must keep it simple, that because you use the word GDP and inflation. So we want you to break down the GDP, what is GDP, and also what is inflation, and how do people feel on the ground, those two things, the GDP and inflation. So I'm going to hold your feet to the fire to break down these two.
Thanks, Danny, and I appreciate it. GDP is really what we refer to as gross domestic product. It is really the total output of goods and services of the economy. And it's a good way to judge whether or not a country is doing good, because it shows the total amount of your production, what you're producing within the country. And the way that is done typically is that you break down the economy into sectors. So the economy is broken down, for example, into the agriculture sector. That would involve forestry and fishing. Then you have the construction sector is another part, the government sector. You break it down into sectors, and you try to estimate what it is that the economy is producing, and you put a value, monetary value on it. So it's really the monetary value of all the goods and services that are produced in the country within a given period, and it's usually done over a year. So every year you measure your output and you see how it compares with the previous years. That's one. With regards to the inflation, that is really the price level. So for example, if for a good example is the price of bread. If the price of bread was, say, like a massive was $1, and now it's $1.50, it would mean that inflation is, with regards to bread, has gone up by 50%. All right, so the price have gone up. Inflation really means an increase in the price level. What is done normally is that you try to average the price across all goods and services. So you have an average price across all goods and services. And in the case of Dominica, it has been increasing on average at about 3.5% a year, sometimes even lower. But what we see, what I can tell you going forward, because of the COVID pandemic and because of the prices going up, because of oil in particular, the price of oil going up, inflation, the price level is expected to rise. It should go high, probably up to as much 5-6%, which will have a direct impact on our ability to spend and impact our incomes directly.
Now, typically, Dr. Fontaine, the larger the GDP, the higher the value of goods and services in the economy or in the country, the more opportunities there are, right? Because more value in the goods and services would mean more things are happening. More businesses are operating. There's a high level of government spending. More people are employed. More people are paying taxes. More people are purchasing goods and services at a higher level. That's what it means, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly what it means.
So there's a direct link between the value of goods and services in a country and the ability of that country to provide opportunities for employment. And I want to mention the comparison with Antigua, because a lot of our young people find employment in Antigua. We need to understand that while the Dominica economy is a $1.5 billion economy, meaning the total value of goods and services in Dominica is about, well, pre-COVID, it's about 1.5 billion, right? Antigua, pre-COVID, was 4.5 billion, meaning Antigua was 3 times the size of Dominica. The economy of Antigua was 3 times larger than Dominica. Now, interestingly, in 2020, the economy of Antigua declined by 20.2%. And then the following year, after the first year of COVID, it bounced back by 5%. It's still 15 percentage points behind where it would have been in 2019, but it appears it is bouncing back. This year, Antigua announced what they call an amnesty for non-nationals living in Antigua, that they want to encourage to stay in Antigua, so they want them to regularize their stay. Normally, it would take you 7 years before you qualify, 7 years living in Antigua before you qualify to apply for citizenship. Antigua says for the next few months, we're dropping that down to 4, because we want people to stay, our brothers and sisters from the Caribbean countries to stay in Antigua, because we don't have enough of the native population for the jobs and the economic opportunities that we will generate. And interestingly, Thompson, I want you to comment on this. Dominica in 20, as I just said, in 2020, the economy of Antigua declined by 20%. And then it grew by 5% in 2021. But in 2021, the public sector investment spending in Antigua was only $80 million. In Dominica, it was over 400 million. But Dominica only grew by 3%, smaller economy grew by 3% on the back of $400 million in public sector investment spending, while Antigua, with a larger economy, $80 million in public sector investment spending, was able to grow by 5%. That suggests that the private sector in Antigua is much larger, with much greater impact on the affairs of Antigua and Barbuda than the private sector in Dominica is. And what we have is a over-reliance on the public sector spending, what government is doing to drive the economic activity going forward. And unless we see some kind of shift towards more private sector involvement and expansion of the private sector, we will continue to trail countries like Antigua and Barbuda in the region in terms of economic performance. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, Lennox, it's interesting that you mention Antigua, or that you refer or you do the comparison to Antigua. I happen to know the Antigua story very, very well. In fact, last week Sunday, and the Sunday before that, I was on Antigua Radio Observer, with a panel of Antiguans discussing the Antigua economy, discussing the budget that was just passed in Antigua. So I happen to know the figures that you speak about very, very well. And it is true that Antigua's public sector spending is a fraction of what we spend, yet there's a lot more what we call bang for the buck. Antigua is benefiting a lot more. And the reason for this is part of what I described earlier, where you have massive leakage, not only through, in our case, through imports, where you have a huge leakage in imports because we import practically everything into Dominica that goes into the construction sector, but also because of the fact that the arrangements that we make, we're not using local talent, we're not using local businesses, we are not using local labor to a very large extent. So that is the reason why you find our spending is over close to $1 billion, $500 million, sorry. Yet the impact on GDP is so small. Antigua's main reliance is tourism. And that's the reason why they fell by 20% in 2020, because tourism took a heavy blow. But they've been able to recover a lot of that because of proactive policies. They are encouraging people to come back, but also because they're invested in the tourism sector. So you have really a tale of two cities or two countries that is so different. And the end result of all of this is that our Dominicans who otherwise should be engaged in Dominica are forced to go to Antigua, are forced to go to St. Kitts and other places in the Caribbean because they're not getting the opportunities in their own country. And you have to wonder, what kind of government is this? What kind of government that A, denies the country the full impact of its revenues from the sale of its passports, and B, denies its citizens the right to even work in their own country? I mean, I cannot think of any country, Lennox. I mean, Dominicans go to Antigua, but they're additional. As you talked about the amnesty, it means that they want the additional workers. There are people already taken care of, and they're encouraging others to come in. That's not the case in Dominica. Our people are underemployed, our people are unemployed in Dominica, yet others are coming in and taking jobs in those areas where there is a spending. So you have this big disconnect in terms of government policy, which is driving this. And the other thing I would like to point to is the whole question of the role that government is playing in the economy and in a process we call crowding out. The government of Dominica, by its actions, it is crowding out the private sector. In any economy where you have growth and development, the private sector plays a critical role in that development. We're talking about businesses, small businesses or medium, large businesses that are able to employ anywhere from 5 people to a few hundred to a few thousand people. Every country encourages the private sector. In Dominica is the reverse. If you look, for example, at one of the figures, look at the numbers in Dominica, you see that the amount of money that goes to the private sector is declining every year. It is dropping by as much as 3-4% every year. That means businesses in Dominica have less access to resources, less access to loans, less access to overdraft resources, less access to being able to borrow. They can't borrow as much, therefore they can't do as much. Also, new businesses can start up because they have no access. And one of the reasons is because the government is the major player. It is pushing the private sector aside. Government, for example, borrowed $367 million from the National Development Bank between 2019 and 2020. $367 million. And as a result, they caused the debt of Dominica to increase from about 100% of GDP to 106% of GDP. So that right now our debt levels close to $1.5 billion. That is a lot of debt. That is a lot of debt. And the question is, how are we going to continue to sustain that debt? And how are we going to get out of the situation that we're in?
Yes. Doc, a question. We often hear about, a country's debt to GDP ratio, and that is comparing the measure comparing, public debt to our gross domestic product. In fact, it actually measures what a country owes as opposed to what it produces. And some time ago in the parliament, we heard a dispute with respect to, a high, GDP to debt to GDP ratio by the Prime Minister and also by one of the ministers, trying to insinuate that during the United Workers' Party, there, of course, was a high debt to GDP ratio. Doc, why is it so important? And I know they were trying to distort the figures, but the question is that, why is it important to maintain a low debt to GDP ratio vis-a-vis a high debt to GDP ratio?
So that's an excellent question. You see, debt is a very critical part of a country's budget and the spending pattern. When your debt levels continue to rise as they're doing, what that means effectively, resources that you otherwise could use, for example, to build roads, to build hospitals, to give an increase to the public servants, these monies now have to go into servicing that debt, because you must service your debt to continue to get more debt. And if it's one thing, the government of Dominica will tell you that they are proud to say that they're servicing the debts, and it is true. And the reason why they're servicing the debt is because as soon as you begin to default on your debt, then you stop getting additional debt or access to borrowing. So it is very important to have a low debt to GDP ratio, one, because it means that you are in what they call a sustainable position. You are able to maintain those debt payments. It does not place an undue burden on your government resources. It does not place an undue burden on your people, because like it or not, it is the people that have to keep paying this debt. This debt has to be repaid through usually taxation. And if your debt levels continue to rise, one of the means the government has to repay this debt is to impose higher taxes on the population. So at some point, your VAT may increase, your customs duties may increase. All of that, the consumer or the individual in the country has to pay for it. So there is a very real price that is paid. One, you have denial of services. Secondly, your level of, you will be denied probably wage increases and so on. Third, the debt, the tax burden on the consumers, on the individuals in the country increases. So it is very, very dangerous. And that's the reason why, for example, you find most developed economies, their debt to GDP ratios are less than 20% of GDP, less than 20%. In Dominica, we are now over 100%. We are at the critical level, or what they call threshold. And so much so that in the IMF report, the IMF is calling on the Dominican government to use the CBI money to do what? To repay debt.
No, but Thompson, at the same time, the IMF is calling on the government of Dominica to use the CBI revenues to repay debt. But it doesn't seem that the IMF Article 4 consultation is concerned at all with an accurate assessment of the amount of money that Dominica is earning from the Citizenship by Investment program. Because, for example, we have been able to determine that on the strength of selling 23,794 citizenships over the 4-year period, 2016 to 2020, Dominica earned from the sale of citizenships $5.4 billion, of which only 1.2 billion came into the treasury of Dominica, leaving an unaccounted balance of $4.2 billion somewhere out there. The debt of Dominica right now is only 1.5 billion. If you take the 1.5, if you pay off all Dominica's debt from that 4.2 billion, you still have $2.7 billion remaining to do the work of Dominica. And I think a time has come where we need to get real. Go back a minute, Dr. Fontaine, to this question of the multiplier effect of government spending on the economy. And look at the public sector investment program where we spent $400 million. Part of the problem with the low multiplier effect on the economy is that $400 million, all of it didn't really hit Dominica. You have a significant amount of it that is coming from citizenship by investment, which is our money, but which never came into the country because those who are providing the services get paid overseas. Quite apart from having foreign workers, those who are providing the services get paid overseas, so the money never comes to Dominica. And then you have a significant amount of that, of those projects, the project funding, that goes back to the developer in fees that nobody knows anything about because these projects are untendered. So where you have public sector investment projects that are under the umbrella of the Citizenship by Investment Program or run by MMCE, you're looking at values that could be all just 50% of what they really are, what is stated on the books. So when we talk about $400 million, it really probably is about 200 and something million as opposed to 400 million. And that is a real concern because unless we bring these CBI revenues onshore, unless we take them from where they are and bring them here and start using them to manage the country's business, we're not going to see our way because we have witnessed a paradigm shift in the way this economy operates. Years ago, it was that people went to work, made money, paid taxes, government got tax revenues, and did things for the people in education and health and so on. So the government's revenue to run the country depended on the output of the people. They have now taken the people's passports and sell to them. That money doesn't come through the people. It comes directly into the government. So the government is able to do what it wants with that money. And really and truly does not have, no longer is reliant as governments in the past for meeting current commitments like wages and so on from tax revenues. Although that is done, they have a backup in the citizenship by investment monies that they can use to do as they please. That in itself is, it almost emerges as a kind of a disincentive because I have all this free money. Why do I need to be hurting or bursting my brains about growing the economy? I'm growing as government on the back of the people's citizenship revenue. That's good enough for me. We have a problem.
You know, it's a big, big problem. And I'm glad you raised that issue because, you know, the government postures itself as a government for the people. But when you look at the actions of this government, it is anything but. And that's a classic example of it, where this huge leakage, as we talked about earlier, where there's a pretense that monies have been spent in Dominica, but the country is not benefiting from it. And that is unique to Dominica. I remember at the end of the elections in 2014, Hartley Henry was on Barbados Radio boasting how the Dominica elections was a boon. His words, the Dominica election was a boost to the Barbadian economy. And he was making a boast of that. He was proud. Hey, you know, I am the
But
the
he should
advisor
be.
to
He should
the
be. He's a
Skerrit.
Barbadian. He should be.
Yes. And the reason for that is because the government of Dominica, in the election spending of millions of dollars, they put that money into Barbados, into the printing of T-shirts, of leaflets, of hiring of consultants, and all the rest of it. So all of that money went to Barbados. We have a similar situation now with our CBI money, where it is not in the control of Dominicans or in the hands of Dominicans. It is in the hands of foreigners, and even where a tiny fraction is spent on Dominica, it still does not get to the average Dominican. So we are losing out in every way, and that does not strike me as a government that cares about the people of Dominica. The second thing is you raise, Honorable Alex Clinton, has to do with the taxes. Let me give you, I'm looking at the figures for the government revenues from taxes. In 2018, it was 27.4% of GDP. It fell to 23.2% of GDP in 2019. And in 2020, it falls to 21.9%. What does that tell you? That is an example of a shrinking economy. That's an example of businesses being closed. That's an example of less VAT being collected. An example of less income tax being collected. Yeah.
Less people working.
Yep. Less people working. And as sort of less people contributing and less people buying goods and services and less VAT. So you have this huge reduction. I mean, you're talking about almost 7% reduction in GDP. That is at least almost a $400 million loss over that period. This is big. This is huge, and because of this loss, you find that we're in a situation that is not sustainable, because countries that prosper, countries that do well, is that they're able to expand their tax base. They're able not to overburden the population with tax, but have everybody pay their fair share of taxation, but that is sustained over many, many years. What you have is a situation, this government, I said yesterday, the government is really on life support. The life support that has been pumped into the veins of the Dominican economy is the CBI program. But this program is not sustainable. It is picking up the slack right now. And as you said, they're putting the monies in piecemeal. And the point you made, Lennox, about the IMF, and I will tell you, having worked at the IMF, I know the way the IMF operate. I am positive that they're having these discussions with the government about this balance that you talked about, this balance of $4.2 billion. I'm confident of that. They will not, however, publicize that in the documents that they make public, because as far as they're concerned, the government is telling them that that is the amount of money we made for this year. Okay, privately they can question it, they can query it, but the official numbers from the government is that they made 400 million EC dollars, when in fact they made 1.2 billion EC dollars or even more. So because of that, they will not query, but I'm sure behind the scenes, and that's the reason why they keep telling the government, you can use these CBI revenues to do two things: to pay debt, and secondly, to put in an insurance fund, so that when there is a next hurricane, as there will be sometime down the road, you will have something to fall back on. So they are very much aware of what is going on. But the behavior of our government, I can tell you, I still don't understand, and I'm trying to get someone to explain to me how the people of Dominica believe, or how can they believe that this government truly cares about them when in their every action, I mean, with those types of resources that you have at your disposal, there's hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. Shouldn't the lives of the average Dominican be improved? Shouldn't there be job creation, as there is in St. Kitts and Nevis, where they have used the CBI money? Shouldn't there be an onslaught of people returning, Dominicans coming back to look for jobs in Dominica, or the nationals coming to look for jobs in Dominica? Shouldn't that be the situation given the amount of money that this government has? But yet we see gross mismanagement of those resources. We see them keeping part of it outside, And the second part, whatever they spend is not benefiting the people of Dominica. And that to me is a real cause of concern. And the people of Dominica need to start demanding more of the government.
Well, if you're joining us at this hour, we have with us Dr. Thompson Fountain. He is, I think it must be past 3 now, Honorable Linton.
Yeah,
It's after 3, but he's stayed up to share with us his thoughts as an economist. And in studio we have Honorable Linton and Glenroy Coffee. And it's 8:55 our time. What I would like us to focus, because you've explained what the IMF has found, and you give us your broad impressions of the Dominican economy. In the next hour, because it's 8:56 now, I want us to focus a little on what we should be doing to inspire hope and confidence in our young people. Well, here are some of the things we can do to, make a difference in our economy.
We can spend some of the CBI money to build a proper water industry in Dominica. You know that Antigua, that is struggling to have running water in the homes of the people on a regular basis. They have a water problem over there. They have free water bottling plants. They have free water bottling plants in Antigua. You know, there's a certain company in Dominica importing water from Jamaica to sell in Dominica under their label in a plastic bottle. This is crazy. Dominica has the best quality surface water in the entire region. We lost the manufacturing of water products, 99-point-something% water, meaning soft drinks, juicy, Coke, 7-Up, Sprite. We lost that production to other countries in the Caribbean with less water and worse quality water than us. How did that happen? That has happened in the last 20 years. So if we take some of that CBI money and commit it not just to hotels that end up having less than 15% occupancy, while the developers of those hotels went away with hundreds of millions of dollars for themselves for putting the structure down. We can invest in industries that make sense for us. Water is one of them. Agriculture is huge for us. Has always been, will always be. Because notwithstanding all the talk here about bananas and the difficulties we have had, people around the world are not eating less bananas, Matter of fact, they're eating more because there's this high level of wellness consciousness and so on, and people are trying to live their lives better, so they're eating natural foods and so on. Where's the creative thinking? Where's the innovation in government that provides leadership for the economy, that has allowed us to take advantage of these opportunities? With all the root crops that Dominica has, we have not made any inroads into meaningful export of root crops, even processed dashing, like we can make chips, cassava chips, or plantain chips, or a mixed bag of chips, which I saw selling well on the shelves in the United States from Trader Joe and so on. They have one pack. In one pack, you can find 5 different chips. All the 5 different chips are from products that we can do well here in Dominica. So where is the creative thinking? Where is the vision? Where is the innovation that takes the lead on moving our abilities, our natural assets, our nature island blessings, and converting that into valuable products that can find a worthwhile place in the international trade of goods? That hasn't happened for us. And one of the things we have done in the past 8 years is continue to point people's attention to what is possible from Dominica. And within the agriculture field, within the nature island blessings we also have a strong capability in cannabis. So we years ago started talking about medicinal cannabis, medical marijuana, and beginning to think about a place for us in world trade of the raw material, of processed goods, whether they be for the wellness market or whether they be for the cosmetics industry, because there are possibilities all around. Instead of going in that direction, instead of engaging the research and development that would put us on the road to earning a worthwhile place in that international trade, we have restricted our involvement in marijuana to facilitating young people to smoke a spliff or to have 28 ounces of marijuana on their person without being prosecuted for it. And you have a government whose leader says there is no worthwhile economic benefit to be gained from that industry, regardless of what the opposition says. And it stays there, and we languish in the opportunities that other countries are picking up on are passing us by. And down the road, when we see what other Caribbean islands will be able to do, we'll ask ourselves, why are we so far behind? In the very same way as we're asking ourselves, why are we so far behind in the construction of an international airport when all other countries in the region have had international airports for God knows how long? We are the ones now fighting with ourselves and quarreling with ourselves and cursing people for an international airport that we still don't know we're going to get. Where's the hope for young people? The hope is in a new government that has the ideas and has the capability of translating those ideas into action programs for the growth and development of the economy for all Dominicans. As difficult as it is, Thompson Fontaine, and with all of the evidence of the shrinking economy that we're talking about, it is still not an economy for all Dominicans. It is still who the government likes that has the opportunities to grow and develop. And people are struggling, people are suffering. It's a hard go overseas, boss. A lot of us, when Thompson mentioned a while ago the the young man with the story about the Mastiff bread, right? And increasing the price of the Mastiff bread. The point he made, which hit me, is that the money that you'll have to pay now to get the Mastiff bread, the additional money he has to pay to get the Mastiff bread, has canceled out his opportunity of buying a cube cheese to put in the Mastiff bread, you know.
Yeah.
And that is the reality that people live in Dominica day to day. Because the kind of income that families used to know out in rural Dominica, more specifically in the heyday of bananas, in the heyday of vibrant, thriving agricultural marketing of our products in Dominica, that has totally and absolutely disappeared. And for 20 years, this government has put no strategic focus at all on that, because it is seeing all of this windfall income from citizenship by investment, which money belongs to the people because it's from their passport. They're doing what they want with it, but they're not using it to reduce our debt when they can cancel all our debt and put us in a different fiscal position. As of tomorrow morning, they prefer to have the money under the control of one friend of the prime minister overseas, doing as he pleases with it, getting contracts from the government with no bid, with no tender, having free reign to do as he pleases with the build out of the economic infrastructure of Dominica. That is what the government wants, and that cannot be good for Dominica, because we have shown you where the problems emerge. And I'm hearing that even the local contractors that were given some little token jobs, engagements, some of them were building houses at Joe Burton and so on. The price that man who oversees everything and is in charge of everything is willing to pay them, leaves them out of pocket. Go and find them and ask them about it. How is this acceptable? Because they're being given contracts and they're being forced to accept contracts that leave them owing somebody after the job is done. You think they want to go back in that?
Yes, and I'm
You
happy
know,
that.
then,
Okay, yeah, something. Well, yeah.
sorry, you can go ahead. So that's fine, or I can continue.
Yes, I have a question for you again, but I will just
Yeah, because I wanted to comment on the question that Danny raised and which Lennox began to answer.
Yes, but
concerning-
I just want, in terms of your response, let me just give you the question one time, because you just do one thing, because I know it's late and you have to wrap up. Let me just say that just what you said there earlier in terms of your opening or your introduction about the economy of Dominica has fallen by 11% in 2020. And I saw a document showing that our unpaid checks is in the region of, let's say, $19 million. And I don't know how satisfied the IMF is with respect to the government economic policies. But I know when Argentina had their problems some years ago, the IMF was quick to we maybe have not reached that active stage, but I know the IMF was quick to come and they put in some structural adjustment. At what point would the IMF come in and help with respect to, if they suspect a country's economic policies are not working? At what point they will come in to at least give to help in terms of restructuring that economy? Because we're not feeling it. And just to add to what the Honorable Lellington said, and he talked about value added in a sense, but right now we have, let's say, passport vendors, and we don't see them doing real estate, doing buying of expensive properties and so. And just by way of value added, I was thinking of, instead of just depending on the fresh produce, like just the bananas and the plantains going on and maybe the dashings, why can't they themselves come together, put that money together, and at least come with some form of investment that we can do blast freezing of our produce. You peel the dashings, you peel the figs, you do parboiling, and we export. That can be a lucrative venture, But I believe, while we may not be so satisfied that the CBI is actually furnishing Dominicans' need, but I believe where the money is concentrated, it is concentrated in the wrong areas. And I believe there's an opportunity now for those who are benefiting from the CBI to come up with some constructive investment to get the young people started and running, and to help Dominica come out from that economic morass.
Yes, indeed. So, and I would like to add to that, to what both you and Honorable Clinton indicated in terms of what can be done. In addition to what you've already said, I mean, I am as clear-eyed, as, vision-free on this as I can ever be, in terms of being able to turn around the fortunes of Dominica, turn us from a mendicant society to a strong, productive economy where there is work, where people have choice of work. People can, even if they want to work 2 free jobs, they can get that opportunity. There would be, for me, one, and using the CBI resources, because that's what we have now. One, a focus on education. You would want to invest even more in the young people, because after all, the best resource that Dominica has is its people. And within this group of people, the young people are the most precious resource that the country possesses. So you want to invest in education. And the way you do that is to make sure that every child has access to 3 primary, secondary, and if possible, tertiary education. All of the Dominican students who are experiencing hardships at this time in various colleges, some, I'm told, have to come back into Dominica with their heads bowed because they're not able to finish their programs. All of those students should be supported, and we should have targeted areas that we would need those resources. For example, in manufacturing, degrees in accounting, in marketing, in IT, areas that these young people can go out there, come back, you pay for them, but you give them this, make sure that they give at least 4 years. They would have to contract to at least 4 years of service. They come back to Dominica and they get to work building this country. So a major investment in education. In fact, Antigua has done that. We talk about the success of Antigua. The number one investment, the number one spending item in the Antigua budget is on education. And they're doing those things in Antigua. We can do it in Dominica. Secondly, I would tackle the other natural resource that we have in addition to our people. The key natural endowments we have, which is our geothermal energy. You would want to use geothermal energy and other renewables to reduce the cost of electricity. A major cost in manufacturing is electrical costs. The cost to move the machines, to turn the turbines and so on. You can invest in those renewable energies, whether it is solar, wind energy, wind, geothermal, so that you can use that. Sorry?
I was just talking about even expanding the hydro. We already have
the hydro, yes.
Yeah.
We're in such a unique position. We have every single one that God offers to the world. We have it in Dominica. So we can turn that around to help support a massive manufacturing focus, where what you spoke about, so the whole question of manufacturing, of adding value to agriculture, agro-processing. Let us talk about agriculture, putting money into agriculture, into a water industry. You'll be able to support those efforts if you have this. The third thing would be a focus on reducing the cost of living. Make life more tolerable for more Dominicans. And how can you do that? You want people to have a certain level of income that they can go to the store. They can get up, work. By the end of the day, they can go to the grocery shop and shop. They can go to the market and buy their provisions and the vegetables and so on. You want to reduce the cost. And the fourth thing in this is a focus on the export sector. Our exports have dropped to about $15 million. 15 million EC dollars of exports in the year 2021. When as early as 1900, we were doing hundreds of millions of dollars in exports in today's dollars. If you to translate those exports in the dollars at the time to now, that would be the equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars of exports. We need to focus. So the question, Danny, it is very practical. It is very doable. What it takes is a mindset, is a policy shift, is a government that is focused on the people of Dominica. And we have already established that. I think from our conversation tonight, the Dominican public has no doubt that this government does not care about the people of Dominica. It does not care about the development of the people. By their actions, we are not judging them. We're saying, look at their actions. Look at how they've managed or mismanaged the CBI program. Look at how they've mismanaged the private sector. Look at how they don't care about supporting local investors. They're not concerned about supporting restaurateurs or hoteliers in Dominica. They're not interested in supporting people locally. They're not interested in supporting even our very own students whose parents cannot afford because they're not working. They have no opportunity in Dominica. Their children now have to come and sit down at their parents' home because they have to leave school because the government has turned its back on the children of Dominica. That is the situation we have in Dominica. So this can be reversed. This is reversible, but it will only happen with a change of government. And that's why the United Workers' Party is well positioned to be the government that can make those changes, because we have told you over and over again, that is what we're interested in. We're interested in people's development. We're interested, when we campaigned a few years ago, we talked about 3,000 jobs in 3 years. We are concerned about the people of Dominica. We are concerned about our most precious resource. We are concerned about keeping Dominicans in Dominica. Over the past few years, we are losing people at the rate of 2% a year. Every year, 2,000 people leave Dominica permanently. Our population is shrinking. We can reverse this, but the way we reverse it is by investing those CBI resources into those things that will create jobs, number one, that will give us an education system that is bang on, and that will give us, put us in the lead in the world in the use of renewable resources. These are the issues, these are the things, and it is free advice for the government. They can take it.
But
That's
you said
free advice.
You spoke from your numbers there, Thompson Fontaine, about 2,000 people on average leaving Dominica every year, right?
Yes.
Now, in the 4-year period, 2016 to 2020, we sold the citizenships to 6,000 people per year in that period. Right? Now, one of the questions we can be asking legitimately at this time as we look ahead is, given the fact that we are not going to get by in the world community with allowing people or paying people to do for us things that we can do for ourselves, and at the same time not developing the capability to build things that we can do for them more economically or better than they can do it for themselves. So this question of import substitution, which drove the early development in countries, successful countries like Singapore and so on, we have to get to that point where Hilary Shillingford in Salisbury will not have to show us acres of tomatoes on the Grand Savannah that are rotting in his field because the local supermarkets are bringing their tomatoes from somewhere else. They're supporting a farmer in somewhere in the United States or England or somewhere, instead of supporting the local farmer to do what we can do. We are buying water from other people, right? We are buying water from other Caribbean countries. We are selling bay leaves on the shelves of Dominica supermarkets. $51.75 for a container that has 6 ounces of bay leaf, which means $8.50 per ounce of bay leaf imported into Dominica.
We import bay leaf?
Yeah. I mean,
Something is wrong.
how can you be running a country and not be paying attention to these fundamentals?
Something is wrong.
The little money you have is being spent on imports that you don't need. It's being spent on things that you can do for yourself right here in Dominica. And at the same time, you're paying no attention to the unique gifts that we have that we can share with the world if we develop that proper manufacturing capability and export manufacturing capability, to put it that way.
And let us, it causes me to cringe, when you think of, we're importing bay leaf, importing tomatoes, importing carrots, importing fish.
Yeah.
I mean, it is something is not right with this picture, but it goes back again to our government. That's where it starts from, the government, and it trickles down to the rest of the population. And I was just thinking, as my heart is truly into developing our young people, giving them opportunities not only in education but also in sports. I was thinking today that how poorly we are doing in sports. Dominica is, at one time, we used to have 9 players on the Windward Islands team. We have 2 this year. 2 players. We have not been able to get facilities for our young people. in terms of Olympic standard training facilities, an Olympic standard pool that they can train. You know, we have done so wrong by the young people of Dominica, and yet we boast of having all of those resources, all of these monies. We need to invest in the young people. We need to invest in their education. We need to invest in sports. We need to invest in coaches. We need to invest in giving people opportunities. You know, I was looking, for example, at the number of young people, of young West Indian cricketers who made it to the IPL, the Indian Premier League. About 17 players. And the 17 players, they get to share almost 11 million US dollars amongst them. Okay?
For a few months of cricket this year.
For a few months of cricket. Why? Because Jamaica is investing in its sports, training its young people, so that even if they don't work in the country, but at least they have something that they can make money from and make a lot of money from. Barbados is doing the same. There are Bajans there, there are Trinis there, there are Antiguans there, and there are no Dominicans. So we have failed our Dominican people, and in particular our young people, in so many ways. And you know, I'll put some of this blame on the adults, you know, because some of these of our adults in Dominica are the cause of this, because they're the ones who, for some reason, are giving unqualified support to this government, even when it is hurting them, even when it is hurting their children, even when it is hurting future generations in this country, even when it is hurting the future of Dominica. So I think it is time that we adults, we take responsibility for our actions, and we realize that what we need to do is to make a direct shift, a paradigm shift in Dominica. This government has revealed itself for what it is over 20 years, the inability to move this country, the inability to invest. They've turned the Windsor Park Sports Stadium into a hospital, so people can't even use the stadium for sports. Just absurd nonsense that goes on in Dominica. Complete disregard for the people, complete disregard for the young people of Dominica. We can do better than this. And Danny, I honestly hope that, you know, as adults, we take our responsibilities more seriously and realize that what we do at the ballot box, what we do when we go and we put this X, we see a list of names, UWP, DLP, and we decide to put an X next, not to UWP, but next to the DLP, understand the worth, understand the value, understand the importance of this X. It should not be reduced to a few nights of CO. Understand the long-term implications of the votes that you make, of the votes that you cast. It has a real and practical effect. It has a real and practical effect. And when we make this vote or this cross, we need to understand exactly what it is that we're doing. Are we crossing out our future? Are we crossing out our hopes? Are we crossing out our dreams? Are we crossing out the future of our children? Is that what we're doing when we put this X next to the DLP? These are the kind of things that we need to consider. And I honestly hope that Dominicans will understand how critical the elections are. Because we could have been in a completely different place in Dominica with a different government in place. With a United Workers' Party government in place, we'd have been in a completely different place. Absolutely. I mean, you know, when you think, for example, Lennox, we talk about investment in education. The United Workers' Party built how many secondary schools in 5 years? This government has been there for 19 years, 22 years rather. 22 years.
22 years.
Have they built a school in Dominica, high school in Dominica? Have they done anything that could show young people that they're interested in the development? Instead, look at Desan Palache. You know.
Okay. Hey, Tom, we're taking a break right now to take some calls. So stand by. The numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-425-7, 305-432-9624. Let me run those numbers again. 449-3097, 449-3096, 449-3095, 4257, and the overseas or the international number 305-432-9624. I think there's someone on the line right now. Let's take this call. Good evening, caller. Thanks for joining us. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, Lambi, and so for Rosso.
Yes, my
Honorable
brother.
Danny Luke Day. My vote for Danny.
Good evening.
And our party leader, Honorable Lennox Linton.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. And the most honorable Dr. Thompson Fountain, it's a pleasure to even hear you and to talk to you through this latest technology. Thanks for coming on the program.
Good evening, sir.
I have 2 questions and a comment I'm going to make. And the 2 questions will go to Dr. Fountain because he's the specialist. Now, we learned that the economy fell by 11% last year because of COVID. Knowing that Roosevelt Scary didn't give Dominican that stimulus, because I believe if he had put some money in the economy to stimulate the economy like every other country did, maybe it wouldn't drop by 11%. It might drop by 8 or maybe 9 or even 7 or it could be 10. But he could take measures, instead of getting this hard fall. But he didn't do that. That's why I know he's incompetent and he's dumb. I mean, I don't supposed to say dumb on the radio, but he's a waste. Now another thing again, Dr. Fountain. If the economy dropped by 11% last year, and after Maria dropped by 15%, so 11 and 15, that is 26. Now, the IMF report stated that it might grow next year by 3%. But that's not no growth. We're still minus 23. So you see, after 20 years, these guys, they're lazy and they corrupt. They are not con. That's why they don't care about the people, because they need for themselves is to fill the pocket. Look at another common sense, and I'm not even Dr. Fountain to tell you that. Here is a chance where you have the opportunity to stimulate the economy with the construction industry. And what happens? Foreigners is getting all the contracts. Dominicans are not working. I mean, how much degree you have to learn to recognize and know that is wrong? If he hired Dominicans or give Dominican contractors the money out of their sovereignty, which is the citizenship, we would have been in a better position. But these guys is just a bunch of waste of time. Honorable Linton, hold on, I got one more thing, Honorable Linton. And I'm talking in terms of the budget. Because when it passed the budget, I consider the budget as a fraudulent document. And why I say that is because the number was not enough. And I could give a reference in the first time you pointed out that it was 1.2 billion. And then he said he would make you shame, or make Honorable Linton shame when he calculate the numbers. But up to now, the numbers haven't been corrected. So how can you pass a budget which become law? And the numbers are wrong. That means the document is fraudulent. Anyway, maybe Bob Marley said, Dr. Thompson Fountain, this is Bob Marley. Good night, sir. I talk so much. Thank you.
Great contribution, my brother.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we have more calls coming in. Let's take this one. Let's see. The numbers are 449-3095, 96 and 97. Caller, go ahead, please.
Good evening, Lambert. Good evening to all on the show.
Good evening,
Good
sir.
evening, sir.
Yeah, gentlemen, I've listened to the Honorable Leonard Linton, and I mean, it's just astounding. Just astounding. And I mean, we have a beer like White Tukubuli beer, which represents the country. It represents the country, and it's been made outside of the country for years. And of course, the beer factory was joined with the water bottling plant, at least one bottle. You hear that Antigua has 3 water bottling plants. I mean, what is that? And then they criticize Afi Martin for having given him a river and cannot put a water bottling plant. So I just don't understand what's really going on, except to say that I believe that we have our own Donald Trump as prime minister instead of president, who is just so self-centered and selfish it's all about him staying in power. Every move he makes, it's about him staying in power. It's not about the growing the country and the people benefiting. Thank you.
That's right.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Probably could let Thompson respond.
Yes, yes,
Come
sure.
on.
Yes, let me respond to Bob Marley. I thought Bob Marley was dead, but it's good to know that he's still alive. You know, he made the point. He made the point about consumption and the fact that a stimulus would have helped. Yes, a stimulus can in fact help in a situation, because a key component, we talked about the gross domestic product earlier on. A key component of that as well is consumption spending. That's the reason you'll find that in the US and in the UK and so on, when you have a crisis as we did with COVID, where people were not working, the government was quick to put money, hard cash, into people's hands, because they understood that with that money, they will now go out and spend this money in the economy. And as such, it would cause economic activity and stimulate growth. Now, in Dominica, because of the leakages I spoke about earlier, it is not the same. Because if, for example, government were to give Dominicans a stimulus package, but they have to spend this money on buying bay leaf in the store or tomatoes imported from outside, it doesn't really help us much. Because if they give $10, probably $9 will go back out. All right. So we have to that's why it's so critical that we have our own means of production, that we have our own things going for us. And that's the reason why I said putting an emphasis on an export market is key. Because if you do that, you create the jobs, you create the goods that remain within the country. So that when people buy, then that will have the impact, the desired impact. And, you know, just to talk again, that's the reason why for the second caller, you know, he talked about not understanding what is going on, losing the water industry in Dominica, losing the beer industry in Dominica. And that's all the reason why I say that as adults, especially those 18 years and over, who continue to vote for this Labour Party government, that we have to bear some of the blame. It's a long time Rosa Scurry that showed his colors as not caring about the people. That his every move, his every effort is to keep himself in power. That is his ticket to wealth and luxury, being at the helm of a Dominican government. That is it. But at the expense, at a huge cost, the cost of maintaining Skerritt's $64,000 rental agreement, the cost of maintaining his $1 million buildings is at a huge cost to the people of Dominica. And as responsible adults, we need to understand that. And it's time we begin to look out for ourselves. It's time we begin to look out for ourselves and tell Roosevelt Skerritt enough is enough.
Thompson, it's an interesting observation that you're making from the standpoint that all around the world, he's not hearing me. Yeah, I was saying it's an interesting observation you're making on the standpoint that all around the world, certain kind of behaviors in government get sanctioned or they get punished. One of them is the understanding that people get that the lives of those who they've asked to govern them is growing at a much faster rate and improving at a much faster rate, and in many cases exponentially, while they suffer, is a reason for them to change who is in government. Now, the people in the Labour Party understand that, and they understand that there is no way they could continue doing what they're doing to Dominica, deepening dependency, deepening poverty, making the lives of people a living hell, because they're not really creating opportunities for better lives and livelihoods across the country, which they have the resources and should therefore have the capability to do. They know that, but their mission is not the independence of people. Their mission is not the success of people. Their mission is the failure of people and people going into dependency on them so that they could continue in office. if they were so confident about their ability and their performance and the good things that they say they're doing in government, they should comfortably be relying on those good results for them to have the people's support going forward. But you know what has accompanied this obsession with the people's wealth and using it for their own purposes? What has accompanied that is a plan to keep themselves in office, which is the reason they have hijacked the electoral process in Dominica, the reason they continue to rig elections in Dominica, so that they alone will decide that nobody else should ever be in office in Dominica, which is why the time has come for a decisive intervention by the people of Dominica, because it is their right to choose their government that has been taken away from them by this administration in the last 3 election cycles.
Indeed, Leonard, I want to
One
add to that
question
very,
before you
very, very
continue.
quickly.
I think Lammy have a caller waiting. Let's just take that call and then okay.
The caller left, but there's another one online. Good evening.
Hey, good evening, caller.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You're all having a very good program. I'm just hoping that a lot of Dominican young people and conscious people can really listen to that program and try to get a feel of what our lovely Dominica is like. And I must commend you all for that program tonight. One of my concerns why I really called is I look at a lot of things, and what I've seen is the government is technically living off we the people. For example, they introduced value-added tax that was really something to cut down on some measures they put when PHR was there. That's what they said. But they said they also try to put it on the last debt of the past government. But it's been 20 years and we're still paying that value-added tax. And I'm trying to ask myself, when will it ever end? Because me, that then used to have a bar, before that, we used to make profits. Since that 15% was introduced, then we would go out and purchase things, paying that 15%, but we cannot sell to make back that money because we are not making the amount that they say we must have in order for us to be exempt from, paying the taxes. Now, when you sit back and a lot of the bars know when they sell stuff, in order for them to make a profit, sometimes they have to prepare food. And that is where the expense comes. That is where people are now paying more money for food. Now, just recently, Dominica we don't grow apples. And I find myself importing apples to, trying to sell it lower than what they're selling it in town. But you know what? When you get there to the port, they're actually charging 67 point something percent for one apple. And I'm asking myself, but what is there for the people? The people is like, the government is living off the people. They have us working like ants for them to benefit, and they can decide what goes there and what. There's so much I would like to talk about. But, I'm just going to leave you guys up to,
Thank you very much.
And I'm listening, okay?
Thank you very much.
Good point, man.
We have more calls coming in. Good evening on the overseas line. The time is 9:39. Go ahead, please.
And can you hear me clearly, sir? Good evening.
You're loud and clear, and be as brief as you can.
Okay, yes, sir. So earlier on, Sam sir spoke about the Windsor Park Stadium. And to my surprise, this stadium right now is being used as an abattoir and a hospital. Now, as we all know, that Dominica is a place where West Indies cricket been getting the biggest support. See, we have a coming, we're going to go to Grenada, we're going to go to Antigua and Barbados. I was really trying to find out from Rosin Paul tonight what it is that they have done to the West Indies Cricket Board of Control that they want no part of Dominica to host international cricket. Is it? I mean, what's going on, Rosin Paul? With you tell people, because I mean Grenada. Why Grenada over Dominica? Tell us what have you did, Rosin Paul. Take care now.
Thank you very much for that. Let's take this other call, please. Go ahead on this line.
Yes, good evening to you, Mr. Lambi. Good evening, Mr. Linton.
Good evening,
Good
sir.
evening to Danny, and good evening to Dr.
evening.
Fountain. I have a
Good evening.
question tonight for Dr. Fountain, and it's a question that has been plaguing me for a very long time, because there's this lady for over a decade now. Every time I would stop by her, the first thing she would tell me is that my former Prime Minister, Mr. Edison James, he have, because of wasteful spending, he have caused Dominican national debt to rise, and he have put pressure on the Labour Party government to have them paying back his debt. Dr. Fountain, can you define this thing for me tonight and tell me whether it's really true? What she's telling me for a decade and more now, I'd like to know whether it's true. Dr. Fountain, thank you and good night.
Thanks a lot for that. More calls are coming in. Let's facilitate those callers and callers be brief as they can, as a couple folks just did. Go ahead, please.
Well, gentlemen, I'd like to say good evening to everyone in studio. And,
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, and to my brother Thompson. What I want to say to Mr. Linton, you know, I know you don't take a lot of hits from this gentleman on the other side. And the more you teach the people, is the less they tend to want to pick up anything. And my brother Thompson is giving me the basic fundamentals of how economic advancement works for a nation, even for an individual. And the government has failed to take it. From my observation, the government, like it has been said a while ago, the government does not care about the people. What the mistake has been done is you have an addict and you let an addict take charge of guarding the drugs that you have to dispense. And the addict don't take the drug and use it for himself. And this is an example of what we have, where somebody who is not a financier picks up the finances of the nation. He knows nothing about economics, and he's using it for himself and his friends. And every time they speak, and when Mr. Linton would speak out and teach the people, they go on the other radio stations, and all they do is want to lambaste Mr. Linton, call Mr. Linton name, and Lennox Linton, there's Lennox Linton, and the people just go to sleep. It's like a sleeping pill they use, and the people must wake up and understand. Brothers, I've been hearing this charge that you're putting forward forever, and it's a good cause, and I support it wholeheartedly. And I hope the people will start to understand, like the gentleman who just called a while ago about his bar and whatnot, and many other people who have lost their businesses and a decent livelihood in the country. I'm listening. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for calling. We do appreciate it. And we'll take this one more call before we pass it back to the guests on the program. Good evening. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, Lambi and the entire team.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes.
Is this Mr. Bruno? Is this Mr. Bruno from Warner?
Yes.
Good evening,
By
sir.
himself.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Honorable
How are you doing?
Leader. I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Good. God bless you.
Yeah, man. Keeping it real. I just want to quickly ask Thompson Fontaine something quickly there to clear my mind. The IMF used the geothermal housing and construction that would project growth, I think, till 2020 to 2023. Now, seeing that fall fertile, that fall flat, what can be done, or what would have replaced that or fit in to make that, to make something happen, or to replace? Because if the housing and the geothermal and all of these projects fall flat, and that and we did not get that growth. What can replace that, and how the economy can sustain itself going forward? Thank you for that, for the opportunity.
Yes,
we have someone on the overseas line. Let's just facilitate this person. On the overseas line, go ahead, please. Call, are you there?
Yes, greetings, gentlemen, and good evening.
Good evening,
Good
sir.
evening.
good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. Yes, I heard you guys mention something. I think it's bailiff. Bailiff have been imported. What you call Boaden bailiff is been imported on island. How ridiculous can that be? These people in P7, Fonseja, Bagatelle, and those areas there, who's voting the one-man rogue regime in the name of labor. I want to let them know that labor doesn't exist again. It's a one-man rogue regime they're voting for. The cooperative, the burial cooperative, do they not know about that? So they can check their farmers and go and demonstrate and protest against what that's happening. What's wrong with these people, man? It's not a laughing matter, but these people are jokes on the island, man.
Thank you, caller.
And they're voting for a one-man rogue regime in the name of labor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. We do appreciate it. And not only do we have bay leaf growing in abundance in the southeast and in the east, there's also a lot of that in the north. Yes, in the north, a lot of bay leaf in the north. We are going to pass it back to you, Danny, and then you can.
We want to give Dr. Fountain Maker. We don't want to keep him up whole morning, so we're going to give Dr. Fountain an opportunity to respond to some of the callers.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for that opportunity. Let me start with the last caller and work my way back, and the caller made a very interesting point about people not understanding what exactly is going on, If you want another example of a government not caring about the people of Dominica, look at what has happened with even the housing, the few apartments that the government has built. Every other government before this one has built apartments, but what is the difference between now and then? The difference is that the people who got those apartments got ownership to those apartments. Your government cares about you and will not even give you ownership to the building that you have, so that if tomorrow, for example, God forbid, that you die, you're not even sure that your children are going to get possession of this. I mean, think about it. Also, if you were able to have access and ownership to this, it immediately increases your wealth, because now you'll be able to build equity. You'll be able to over the period use your house as collateral. Now you can securely the loan for your child to go to study. You can securely a loan to probably start a shop somewhere, start a little business. You cannot do any of this because your own government is disempowering you. You have been disempowered, not empowered. That's one. The question that was raised about from Bruno concerning what could be done to replace the growth. I am not a big fan of growth, and I explain the reason why at the start. By government public spending programs. And part of this is, in the case of Dominica, is clear because of the huge leakages that we have, okay? In the sense that your bank, you don't get the multiply, you don't get this added expansion of that dollar spent, which is what you really want. You want when you spend a dollar, that this dollar multiplies and stimulates the growth. You don't have that with especially the way this government has arranged to spend it. So what could that be replaced by? That could have been replaced by an investment in the private sector. Imagine a private sector that is encouraged. The building of a water factory that would employ 50, 60 people. The building of an agro-processing plant that could employ a couple hundred people. The processing of agricultural products that could employ farmers, a few thousand farmers. Investing in that is what you want to do, and that would have taken up the slack. so to speak. So a very quick answer to your question is the private sector investment that would be able to take care of this public sector. On the question of the debt, it is not true that the United Workers' Party indebted Dominica. If you look at the level of debt that existed then, I did a quick search there, and the debt to GDP ratio at that time was around 80%. It is now 26% higher. That's almost 30% higher than it was then. So this notion that somehow the UWP, but again, think of what the UWP was doing at the time. They were using loans to build schools so that now the Kalinagos can be educated. Grand Bay people got this Grand Bay Secondary School, okay? They were educating the people in the north, in the south, all over Dominica. They were cutting roads across the island to link up Dominica. So this was money well spent. What we have today is frivolous spending. So think of it this way. You have two individuals. You give each individual $10,000, right? One individual goes out and spends this $10,000 gambling, drinking, doing other things. The $10,000 go. He spent $10,000. The other individual decides to take this $10,000 and build a little house for himself. It's the same $10,000 spent, but the outcomes are completely different. One, it is wasted, thrown away, as is done by the Labour Party government. In the other case, where this individual builds a home, builds a house, he's building equity so that his $10,000 today becomes $15,000 10 years down the road, because he would have gained equity, gained value in his investment. And that's exactly what happened. The United Workers' Party, they were using resources to invest in infrastructure, invest in education, invest in a road network that now we can reap the benefits. So that has accrued, that has paid itself over and over again. The United Workers, the Dominican Labour Party government is not doing any of this. It is spending, it is this second guy I talked about who is throwing his money on drink, on gambling and everything else. On the
right, Thompson.
Yeah, so I'm trying to run through, and also so I want to answer the question that you asked as well. Now, there was a question raised about the living of the people, and that's a very good issue that was raised, because what this tells me that this government is not a thinking government. But not only is this government not a thinking government, but I think the caller placed his hands. One of the callers placed their hands on the reason why. We have a very pompous and individual who I understood he studied sociology or something. I'm not sure. It may be sociology or something in that vein, but who passes himself off as an expert in economics. So he takes on the portfolio of the Minister of Finance, but he doesn't even understand the basics of fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is the ability to use tax rates and interest rates to manipulate the economy. If I were to ask Prime Minister Richard Sherwood, what is the key instrument of fiscal policy as a Minister of Finance, I suspect he would not be able to answer even after 20 years. And part of what we're seeing is a reflection of that. That's right. He's a person who is not willing to take advice, who is not willing to bring people who knows more than him in that particular area, and who's pretended, because if he understood economics, he would not put the monies of the CBI into the hands of these agents. All of the CBI would be controlled from Dominica. The agents would be in Dominica, everybody would be in Dominica. Our program is attractive, not because you have people walking on the streets of Kabul. Our program is attractive because people want the passport. So they would come to Dominica for it. They would reach out to Dominican agents. So you need to nationalize, you need to bring this back, take this out of the hands of profiteers and modern day pirates who are ripping the country of giving you 100,000 and probably selling a passport for 300,000. Get rid of that. Localize the program. So he's not thinking. This government is not a thinking government. And because they're not thinking, we're in a mess. that we are in. And so to answer the question that you raised about the at what point will the IMF come in, I can tell you one thing you can be sure of. The IMF has no concerns, because they know, and I'm sure they know, the end game of this government. Right. Okay? This government understands that this economy is in a state of collapse. So what they will do, they'll keep as much money outside as possible, just enough to keep the patient on life support. Dominica is in a coma, so you put a little drip, make sure the patient does not die. But also they have a long-term gain, continuing to steal the elections, maintaining themselves in power. And the way you do that is to keep that drip coming. So the IMF knows that there is a substantial amount of money outside. So it's not a question of they stepping in and helping, because we are not in distress. Right. Dominica is not in distress. Dominica has money. It is similar to a person on the street begging for money when they have monies in the bank lined up. So this government, the IMF is not worried about this government, and even talking about a program or anything, because they know the extent of the resources that are available to this country.
Yeah, well said. But I wanted to come in there earlier on, but I'm happy that Dr. Thompson was able to actually beef up this program with respect to put a lot of light on things. And I know we are not in defense mode tonight, but we always have to talk the truth. When the WB came in, we made the debt at $380 million. And when the WB left office, it was about $550 million. So let somebody do the maths now between when the WB left and now with the Labour Party. But interestingly though, I want to talk about the feel-good philosophy of this government. They have that feel-good philosophy about them, and that strategy they think they can work on people. I will just highlight a few, and then somebody else will come in. You see, they let farmers feel good after receiving free tools from the World Bank loans. But, interestingly, after the farmers have worked hard and they've made the production, they cannot market their products. They make young people feel good about scholarships, but when they all left university, there is no jobs for them. They make our senior citizens feel good about $300 a month, but their children and grandchildren cannot get jobs. They make us feel good about beautiful structures, but our health care service are back to the 50s. They make us feel good and they claim about they build roads, but they abandon the Pedit Savant Dalis Road and many feeder roads around Dominica. So it's a make us feel good government that make us feel good, but behind the scenes, nothing is happening. And young people, let me just say, this government has robbed you of the opportunity to survive in this country. When you are not incentivizing the private sector, letting the private sector have its say with respect to driving this economy, because we all know it has the engine of growth. The private sector is supposed to be the engine of growth. When this government deprives the private sector to grow, then they deprive you jobs. Then what is going to happen subsequently is that the private sector cannot burden that kind of debt that they have, because subsequently their expense is going to be more than what they really make. And so they'll have to find a way to lay off workers. We do not want that situation to happen, but this government is competing in the private sector. Case in point, I know there's an agricultural company, a service provider with respect to agricultural tools, fertilizers, and so that is now closing in Newton, I think, all for Dominica, I think. And, it's interesting that the tools that they are giving out from the World Bank's program, most of these tools and fertilizers were available in this company. And instead, we do our local assessment to see what we have in inventory, and what we don't have, we can import it. These guys actually importing everything. No wonder. Thompson, I don't know, Doc, you have not spoken about the trade balance in terms of our import bill. That is something that is very interesting, because a lot of people think that, our import bill is growing, and we are not addressing that. And that is not just about Dominica typically, but in the region itself. But I believe it is worse in our country, and that needs to be addressed. I see this government as a competitor with the private sector. They are not giving the private sector any chance to grow, and they're actually pushing themselves forward. And one more point I would like to make. See the case with Sinaj. Before, when you had a guest artist coming to Dominica, some kind of artist, You find that that was private sector driven. You find that you had the promotional agencies doing that. Today, the government has hijacked that. And a man can even make a little bread by bringing in artists in Dominica. What a shame. What a shame. It is time for them to go.
Okay.
Well said.
Well, I see the clock on the wall says 10. What I want to do at this time is to thank Dr. Thompson Fountain for staying up the wee hours of the morning to share with the Dominican people. And as a party, in my parting shots before the political leader comes on, we want to affirm tonight that our patriotic professionals like Dr. Thompson Fountain, Dr. Dale Dangleben, Dr. Pascal, Dr. Pharaoh, Dr. Christian, our engineers, our agronomists like Dr. Dave Lloyd, Dr. Barron, Peter Carbon, Norris Charles, others who had to run away from the country because this government doesn't want them. We are affirming as Team Dominica that we will bring back these professionals who love their country to come back to give. They won't be making as much money as they're making now, but I'm sure that Dr. Thompson Fountain would be happy to come back to give back to his country and the others names that I've mentioned. And we affirm as a party, we affirm as Team Dominica that we'll be reaching out, to these Dominicans to come back, to give back of their best years.
Danny, we've done it before and we can do it again.
That's correct.
There is a story out there that the Labour Party blames Lennox Linton for everything. That's all right. The reason it doesn't bother me is because Lennox Linton knows that history will absolve him on the right side of all the issues that we're discussing in Dominica right now. I'm satisfied and I'm confident of that because what I stand for is what reasonable people of good Christian conscience want for their countries all around the world. So, for example, history is going to absolve me on the right side of the public works issue, where I'm very clear in my mind that you cannot take the people's money, give it to a passport seller to buy the people's property at public works, for them to do what they want with it to make money for themselves, when the need is for a community space that will address the lives and livelihoods of the people of the constituency. History will absolve me on the right side of that issue. History will absolve me on the right side of the issue of the use of CBI money. We have billions of dollars outside there that is enough to pay off our debt completely and leave us debt-free at the moment, so we'll have zero debt to GDP ratio. Instead, we are keeping our money in the hands of a few friends of the leadership of Dominica to do what he wants with the money in a way that doesn't impress us that the Prime Minister has any control over what is happening. History will record me on the right side of the use of CBI money as free development capital for people who come in, build a hotel, take $163 million from it off the top before the hotel earns 1 red cent. That is not how development and private sector activity has evolved and has evolved and is practiced around the world. We have a new paradigm in Dominica, but I'm saying it's not good for the public interest of Dominica. And I will be on the right side of that issue in history. I'll also be on the right side of the issue of giving the people of Dominica who have houses that have been paid for by the CBI dollars title for those properties without any further delay.
Very good.
Dr. Thompson, your final words.
God bless
When
you.
you let you go fall asleep.
You know, it is lack of sleep well spent.
Yes.
Most you know that most Dominicans understand dominoes and plays dominoes, right?
Yeah.
And this government continues to pause the play, man. You know, you playing in good faith, and then all of a sudden the guy's trying to push a fast one on you, and they pause. You know, the term is pause.
How is it?
That's the kind of government we have in place, a government of fluff. And as Suso talked about, you know, this feel good. That's exactly what con people do. You know, it is called snake oil. They sell you something because there are Dominicans who actually believe that this government is good for them. You know,
Yes. Yes.
Dominicans believe that wholeheartedly. I've met Dominicans who fervently believe that this government is doing a great job. Even when the evidence shows otherwise, you show them that, hey, you don't get ownership for your apartment. Cost of living is rising. They're hiding the money away from you. They're favoring foreigners over you. You give them all of the evidence, yet they still believe that this government is for them.
Yeah.
So that is like, you know, the power is in the game, man. You cannot see through. It is a government of fluff, a government of snake oil. And I think it's time that people of Dominica recognizes that. You know, that they have been taken for a ride, that we can do better. And tonight we just gave you a little glimpse, a slight glimpse into what responsible thinking Dominicans can do and can accomplish. And the United Workers' Party is the party that can lead the way, that knows the way. And Danny, I don't need a second invitation to come to Dominica. Certainly the plan is to do that. I love my country. I love this country, the potential. And as an economist, you know, I'm going Google-eyed over Dominica.
That's right.
Because we have all of the resources. We have everything that we need in Dominica right now, tonight, to make Dominica the best place to live, to work, and to enjoy life. Great. And we're going to make it happen.
God bless you,
By the grace of God.
God bless, brother.
God bless you.
Yeah.
Blessings.
God bless all the listeners.
All the best. All the best. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Come with it. Give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up. Put up, my man. One more time. We live a life of vanity and compromise or intent.